Welcome, everyone. We're diving deep into the mind of Sigmund Freud today.
Sounds intriguing.
You guys sent in a stack of his writings, studies on hysteria, the interpretation of dreams, even Totem and Taboo.
Quite the reading list.
We're going to try to understand Freud in context.
His time and place.
Exactly. Compare his ideas to modern psychology and see what's held up.
Should be fascinating.
Oh, it is. We've got a woman cured by a broken umbrella, connections between dreams and jokes.
And the primal urges hiding behind civilization.
Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride. So to start, late 19th, early 20th century, Vienna.
Ah, Freud's Vienna.
What was the scene like back then?
Think strict social norms, repressed sexuality, mental health.
Yeah.
Not well understood at all.
Makes you realize how revolutionary Freud's ideas actually were.
Oh, absolutely. Shocking even to some people.
Speaking of shocking, there's this case in studies on hysteria that blew my mind.
Oh, tell me about it.
This woman, she couldn't walk. Freud tried everything, nothing worked.
Frustrating, I imagine.
Totally. So he gets this idea, almost jokingly tells her umbrella it'll break and she'll walk again.
Yeah.
The next day, she's walking down the street singing, "Umbrella Breaks." It's page 347 if you want to check it out.
Wow. The power of suggestion, maybe?
Or the unconscious. Even Freud might not have fully grasped what was happening.
True. But he was tapping into something, right? The mind-body connection.
Absolutely. This case, among others, led him to develop psychoanalysis, the talking cure.
Where repressed memories, desires, they're the root of all these neurotic symptoms.
Exactly. And, decades of research in psychology, even neuroscience, back that up.
The unconscious mind's a big deal. We know that now.
So Freud, even without modern science, he was onto something huge.
No doubt.
Yeah.
His techniques, free association, dream analysis, it was all about bringing those unconscious thoughts and feelings to light.
And speaking of dreams, in the interpretation of dreams, he calls them the royal road to the unconscious.
He believed dreams, those strange symbols, bizarre narratives, they're glimpses into our repressed desires, anxieties, all that.
Like, our brains put on a surreal play each night, and the script's full of clues about ourselves.
I like that. And while not all his dream symbol interpretations hold up today, the idea that dreams offer insight into our emotional lives, many therapists still consider that.
So, maybe not Oedipus Complex is in every dream,
Right.
but exploring the emotions and themes, that's still valuable.
Absolutely. Now, onto one of Freud's most controversial ideas, the Oedipus Complex.
Yeah, that one tends to raise eyebrows.
It does. Child develops unconscious desires for their opposite-sex parent, rivalry with the same-sex parent.
It's definitely a lot to unpack. What was Freud really getting at, do you think?
Important to remember, he wasn't endorsing these desires as literal or conscious. He saw it as a developmental stage, symbolic.
A representation of the child's struggle for identity, separation from parents.
Precisely. It's navigating those complex feelings of love, rivalry, and independence within a family.
Interesting. Didn't realize he factored in the parents' influence, too.
Oh, yeah. He observed how their behavior could actually influence a child's Oedipal feelings, recognizing those complex family dynamics. It's on page 3400 if you're curious.
Makes sense. Family dynamics are always a factor.
Right. And while modern psychology views childhood development in a more nuanced way, Freud's focus on early experiences, family relationships shaping us, still relevant today.
So Freud was a pioneer in understanding our inner world and how social forces shape us.
Totally. And that becomes even more obvious when we look at his views on sexuality and gender.
Ooh, that's where things get a little,
Complicated.
that's the word.
For sure. But Freud's work on sexuality, groundbreaking for its time. He challenged those Victorian taboos, arguing that sexuality is a fundamental human drive, even in infancy.
I remember that line from 3 essays on the theory of sexuality. Erogenous zones in children becoming noticeable.
Page 1544. Shocking stuff back then.
Totally. But while recognizing sexuality as this driving force was revolutionary, his ideas about sexual development, especially penis envy.
Yeah, that one hasn't aged well.
Not at all. Can you remind us what it even means?
Basically, Freud thought young girls, realizing they lack a penis, develop envy, inferiority towards males.
Oof.
Right. He saw this envy as driving female development, contributing to psychological differences between sexes.
Very much rooted in the patriarchal thinking of his time.
Unfortunately, yes. We know now gender identity and development are way more complex than that.
Biology, psychology, social factors, all playing a part.
Exactly. No inherent superiority or inferiority between sexes.
So while we appreciate Freud trying to understand female psychology, Gotta acknowledge the societal limits of his era.
Absolutely. Even brilliant minds can be limited by the biases of their time.
And our job's to sift through it all, find those enduring insights while recognizing what's outdated.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of insights, his exploration of jokes, dreams, the unconscious, fascinating stuff.
This is where things lighten up a bit, right?
For sure. Even Freud enjoyed a good laugh.
He did. In Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious, he analyzes how jokes, much like dreams, can offer a glimpse into our repressed desires and anxieties.
He saw them as a kind of pressure valve, a way for our unconscious to express itself in a socially acceptable way. Like, take this joke. Two businessmen meet on the street. Well, says one, how's business? The other replies, oh, it's like riding a bicycle. It's all right as long as you keep moving.
I feel like there's more to that than meets the eye.
Right. The double meaning of keeping moving is key. On the surface, it's about business needing constant activity. But deeper, unconsciously, it taps into that fear of stagnation, falling behind, a common anxiety for businessmen, even if they don't realize it.
So the joke lets them express that anxiety, laugh at a fear that's hard to confront directly.
Exactly. Humor as a release valve. Psychologists and comedians have explored that idea a lot.
Like that relief after a good laugh. It's more than just humor. It's releasing something bottled up.
Now, switching gears a bit, Totem and Taboo. Freud's theories about the origins of civilization and religion. Provocative, speculative.
Yeah, definitely a different side of Freud. Can you give us the gist?
He tries to connect society and religion back to this primal event. Sons murdering a tyrannical father figure, calls it the primal horde theory.
Wow, okay. And totems and taboos come in how?
After the murder, the sons feel guilt, remorse, leads to social rules, prohibitions, including the taboo against incest.
Makes sense.
The totem animal, a powerful creature like a bear or an eagle, becomes this symbolic substitute for the murdered father, revered and feared.
So the totem represents both the father's power and the guilt.
Exactly. It becomes a focal point for religious rituals, social organization. He's trying to link individual psychology to society's development. It's all on page 4240, by the way.
Fascinating. Though I'm guessing anthropologists and historians weren't too thrilled.
Let's just say, met with a lot of skepticism. No evidence for this universal primal event, they say. Culture and religion are far more complex.
Makes sense.
But even if Totem and Taboo isn't a literal history, it raises interesting questions about psychology, culture, societal development, right?
For sure. Our understanding of the human mind, individual and collective, is always evolving.
Absolutely.
Taking a step back, Freud's impact on psychology is undeniable. He gave us a new language for the mind. The unconscious, defense mechanisms, the importance of childhood.
Oh, his ideas are everywhere. Literature, film, even everyday conversations about relationships.
But as we've seen, some theories haven't aged well. Gender and sexuality especially. Challenged, even abandoned by modern psychology.
Gotta be critical, separate the gold from the not so gold.
So where do we go from here? Building on Freud while recognizing his limitations.
Well, psychology, like any science, is always changing. We have new tools, brain imaging, insights from genetics, neuroscience.
They're adding to Freud's story, refining it with new knowledge.
Exactly. And that's what's exciting. We keep learning, questioning, refining.
So maybe not agreeing with everything Freud said, but we can appreciate him, learn from his mistakes.
He was a product of his time, but his questions still resonate today. And that's worth something.
It is. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm going to leave you with a thought. As you explore your inner world, the complexities of human behavior, remember, there's always more to discover, more to understand.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, keep diving deep. And maybe, like Freud, challenge your assumptions. Embrace the beautiful messiness of it all.
Will said, we've covered a lot. Vienna, the unconscious, those outdated ideas.
Quite a bit.
Now, in our final part, we'll try to sum it all up, discuss what Freud's legacy really means for us today. Stay tuned.
Can't wait.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Sigmund Freud. We were talking about Freud's analysis of jokes and how they, like dreams, give us these glimpses into the unconscious.
It's amazing, isn't it, how Freud connected these seemingly random things, dreams, slips of the tongue, even jokes, all windows into the unconscious mind.
Do you have a favorite example of a joke from Freud's work that shows this?
Oh, absolutely. In Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious, there's this one. Two businessmen meet on the street. Well, says one, how's business? The other replies, oh, it's like riding a bicycle. It's all right as long as you keep moving. It's on page 1631.
Okay, I can already tell there's something deeper going on there.
Right. Freud would say it's all about that double meaning of keeping moving. On one level, yeah, it's about business needing constant activity. But on a deeper level, unconsciously, it's tapping into that fear of stagnation, of falling behind,
Ah, I see.
which is probably a pretty common anxiety for businessmen, even if they don't admit it.
So the joke lets them express that anxiety, laugh at a fear that's hard to face head on.
Exactly. That idea that humor can be a release valve for all that tension, anxiety. Yeah, psychologists and comedians have talked about that a lot.
It's like that feeling of relief after a good laugh. Not just the humor itself, but something being released.
Now let's move on to another one of Freud's controversial theories, the origins of civilization and religion in Totem and Taboo.
Yeah, Totem and Taboo takes us in a whole different direction. Can you give us a quick rundown?
Well, Freud tries to trace everything back to this primal event.
Mhm.
Sons murdering a tyrannical father figure. He calls it the primal horde theory.
Okay, that sounds intense.
Yeah.
How do totems and taboos fit into all of this?
Freud says after the murder, the sons feel this overwhelming guilt, remorse. This leads to social rules, prohibitions like the taboo against incest.
Interesting.
And the totem animal, often a powerful creature like a bear or an eagle, becomes this symbol, this substitute for the murdered father.
I see. So the totem represents both the father's power and the
Yeah.
guilt.
Exactly. It becomes this focal point for religious rituals, social organization. It's Freud's attempt to link individual psychology to the development of society as a whole.
Ambitious, to say the least. What did anthropologists and historians think about totem and taboo?
Let's just say they weren't entirely convinced. Many argue there's no evidence for this universal primal event. They say culture and religion are far more complex than that.
Right. But even if totem and taboo isn't a literal history, it does make you think about the connections between psychology, culture, and how societies develop.
Absolutely. It reminds us that our understanding of the human mind, both individual and collective, is constantly evolving.
So looking back at Freud's work as a whole, he undeniably changed how we think about the mind. He gave us the unconscious defense mechanisms, the importance of childhood experiences.
Oh, his influence is everywhere. Literature, film, even everyday conversations about relationships and why people do the things they do.
But as we've discussed, some of his theories, especially around gender and sexuality, just haven't stood the test of time.
We have to be critical, separate the insights from the outdated assumptions.
So where do we go from here? Building on Freud's work while recognizing its limitations.
Well, psychology is always changing, like any science. We have new tools now, like brain imaging and new insights from genetics and neuroscience.
It's like we're adding new chapters to the story that Freud started, refining and expanding his ideas with new knowledge.
Exactly. It's about integrating his contributions with everything we've learned since then to get a more complete picture of the human mind.
So we might not agree with everything Freud said, but we can still learn from him, even from his mistakes.
He was a product of his time, for sure. But his questions, those big questions about human nature, they still matter today.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Sigmund Freud, I want to leave you with a thought. As you explore your inner world, the complexities of human behavior, remember, there's always more to discover, more to understand.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, keep diving deep, and maybe, in the spirit of Freud, challenge your assumptions. Embrace the beautiful messiness of it all.
Well said. We've covered a lot, Vienna. The unconscious, those outdated ideas. Now, in our final part, we'll try to sum it all up, discuss what Freud's legacy really means for us today. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Sigmund Freud. We've really journeyed through his Vienna, explored his ideas about the unconscious.
And grappled with the parts of his work that haven't exactly aged gracefully.
As we wrap up our exploration, where do we land on Freud's legacy? What does it all mean for us now?
It is a big question. We've touched on his lasting insights, the importance of the unconscious early childhood experiences, but also the aspects that haven't held up so well.
So how do we make sense of it all? Appreciating Freud while acknowledging his limits.
Right.
One thing that stands out to me is Freud's willingness to ask those big, even uncomfortable questions about human nature.
He wasn't afraid to push boundaries, challenge the norms of his time, force people to confront their inner world, all those complexities.
Exactly. He really opened up this whole conversation about sexuality, desire, those hidden forces shaping our thoughts and actions.
And even if some of his specific theories are outdated, that spirit of inquiry, that willingness to dive into the messy parts of human experience, that's something we can still learn from.
Absolutely. It's like, okay, maybe not everything he said holds up, but the questions he asked, those are still relevant.
Another key takeaway is recognizing that psychology keeps evolving.
Yeah.
Freud gave us this framework for understanding the mind.
But it's a framework that needs constant updating, right?
Exactly. We have new tools, new perspectives that Freud could never have imagined. Brain imaging, genetics, neuroscience.
It's like he gave us a map, but the landscape keeps changing.
A very good analogy. And that's where modern psychology steps in, integrating Freud's contributions with all the knowledge we've gained since then.
Creating a more complete, nuanced picture of how our minds work.
Precisely. And that's the beauty of it all. We're always learning, questioning, refining our understanding.
So maybe we don't agree with everything Freud said, but we can still appreciate his contributions, learn from his missteps.
He was a product of his time, but he also transcended it in a way. His questions continue to resonate.
And on that note, I want to leave you, our listeners, with one final thought. As you navigate your own inner world, as you encounter the complexities of human behavior, remember, there's always more to discover, always more to understand.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, keep diving deep. And maybe in the spirit of Freud, don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions. Embrace the messiness of it all.
Beautifully said. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Sigmund Freud. Until next time.